this is the end of an era. 2027 is just around the corner, and you saw a lot of the bikes starting to look a lot like each other. All of the aero, all sort of converging around one point. And but I really think it's going to be quite a good season. Things have got a little bit closer, a little bit shaken up. It's interesting.
Hello, what's Paddock Pass podcast? And on today's podcast, we've finally got MotoGP bikes back in action, and we're looking back at the Sepang test. And it's literally just after having the checkered flag waved at us as we bring our thoughts on what we saw over the course of 3 days in Malaysia. As ever, this episode of the Paddock Pass podcast is brought to you by Renthal Street. Check out renthal.com and the Fit My Bike tool to be able to see all the parts that are available for purchase on their website for your bike. David Emmett, you're in Sepang at the moment, and it's been a busy week for you.
It has, but it was just incredibly hectic for some reason. So yeah, I mean, it was great. It was really great to be there again and to be in the paddock see bikes again after such a long time. It was funny. We were talking because I was there with Peter Bohm, and Peter Bohm was saying he'd completely lost all connection with MotoGP, really. And then when he got there, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, no, now I remember what was, why I love this. So, yeah, it was great.
Dave, Neil and I swapped a couple of messages on your first day of action there, saying that we could feel the power of your arousal all the way from the other side of the world.
I didn't feel this, by the way. I just want to be clear on that, David.
No, it was. It was very good. It was just like, it was so intense that you sort of forget, because I had a really relaxing winter, and it was so intense that I'm just absolutely shattered now.
Yeah, and Neil, obviously for you in Barcelona, it's been pretty busy. We've been quite active on social media this week, with David giving us some video updates from Malaysia, and Paddock Notes shows for our Patreon supporters on patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast. So it's been flat out really for you as well.
It has been, yeah. We had a nice note show on Tuesday from the first day. Then I think we had Peter Bohm with David on the Wednesday show. And if you're not already familiar with how we work, we bring these kind of note shows to you every day from a Grand Prix Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before our main show on the Sunday. So, if you haven't already done so, patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast.
Yeah, and obviously with the action having finished in Malaysia, I just want to get one big thought from each of you now that we've seen bikes back on track. David, you've obviously been busy in the media centre, you've been in pit lane, you've been able to see everything up close. What's your one big thought from 3 days in Sepang?
Well, the big thought is, this is the end of an era. 2027 is just around the corner, and you saw a lot of the bikes starting to look a lot like each other. All of the aero, all sort of converging around one point. And as much as I'm really looking forward to 27 and all of the changes, but I really think it's going to be quite a good season. It does feel like there's been, things have got a little bit closer, a little bit shaken up. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is always interesting once we get everyone back, and we were obviously able to see Alex Marquez leading the way on the final day, and Ducati still as fast as ever. But Adam, when you look at it, what's your big thought or takeaway from the test?
A little underwhelming, to be honest, Steve, purely by the fact that, Alex Marquez, props to him, he's incredibly close to the circuit lap record. And also 5 Ducatis, in the top 6. Things pretty much look, as you would say before. Go, Dave.
5 Ducatis in the top 6 on Thursday. Dorna didn't send out a combined times for all 3 days. So obviously I put one together, which I then sent to Dorna so they could use it. Over the all 3 days, the combined times, I have Alex Marquez, Marco Bezzecchi on the Aprilia, second. Fabio Di Giannantonio, Marc Marquez, Joan Mir in fifth on the Honda. Pecco Bagnaia, Franco Morbidelli in seventh. Pedro Acosta and Maverick Vinales in eighth and ninth. And Raul Fernandez in 10th. So it's a bit more mixed up than that. Yes.
Only 5 in the top 7, Dave. Yeah.
When he's not
yes.
haranguing riders in media debriefs, he's now doing the timekeeper's job as well. The man, there's no limits to your talents, Dave.
I like how he didn't send it to us, by the way, as well. That was good teamwork there, Dave.
Can also, just to finish my sort of estimation of the test, of course, as Dave pointed out in his 1 minute videos as well, the YouTube shorts, little roundups from each day, Yamaha, I mean, it's getting pretty terrible for them. I'm sure we'll go into it in a minute, but I mean, are they the Williams or the Aston Martin of MotoGP at the moment?
I don't know what you're talking.
Either of those things are.
Yeah, exactly. You might as well. Yeah. Did someone just start speaking Chinese or something?
Well,
because
they did
I didn't understand any of
ad,
that.
and they turned up with a bike, so they did better than Williams at the test. If that's relevant for you,
that's true. So it's more the Aston Martin then.
Yeah, probably not as well, actually, because Aston Martin does have Adrian Newey making that car, and Yamaha has quite a lot of question marks about theirs. So, yeah, I think that it's a bit of a stretch to make the comparison to either.
Trying to think of some funny wordplay which would link Formula One and MotoGP, but really fallen short here. So I'm just going to give my general impression of the 3 days, which was, just to follow on really from Ad, that, it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. That's kind of the impression I have, really. I mean, positive test, I think, generally speaking, for Honda, KTM and Aprilia, the factories that are chasing Ducati. All three, I think, made real tangible progress. I have made tangible progress over the winter months, but the problem is, so have Ducati, and especially on the final day, Ducati had a real show of strength. We saw that in some of the simulations, the sprint simulations that we saw in the early afternoon. We'll maybe come into this a little bit more later, but certainly the two Marquezes and Pecco Bagnaia looking very, very strong indeed. And I just got the impression, listening to the likes of Joan Mir, Pedro Acosta, some of their previous optimism from the earlier days in the test was just cut down a little bit after seeing that kind of show of strength from Ducati. So do have to add that this is a great track for Ducati. I think they've won each of the last 4 MotoGP races here. They've been fastest at each of the past 5 Sepang tests now. So, this isn't necessarily an indicator that they're going to completely dominate this year, but, they certainly haven't been sleeping over the winter months, which a few of us, I think, were hoping they would do, because that would have opened up the competition a bit more.
Yeah, I think we can just look at the historical precedents and say it's probably quite likely they're going to win most of the races again this year, but we'll wait and see what happens when the season starts. And obviously the season actually officially kicking off this weekend with the launch of MotoGP 2026 as well. So we'll see how that goes. But just going back to the test.
People were really looking forward to that, I can assure you.
I'm surprised you're not sticking around for it, Dave, to be honest.
Well, I am actually sticking around in Kuala Lumpur for 2 days, but unfortunately work commitments means that I'm not going to be able to make it to the launch.
I think Adam was due to fly out just to see the script and then fly home.
Yeah, not much of a script there, Steve.
Which is the problem with the whole event.
Just to go back to the Sepang test then as well, we're going to do it a little bit differently for this test wrap-up. We're going to have our winners and losers for each of us on it. And Adam, I'm going to come to you first, just purely alphabetical order. Who's your first big winner of the Sepang test?
I saw a social media entry or comment from somebody saying that they hope that 2026 MotoGP was not Marquez GP again. And the kind of signs, I think, so far from the laps made and the 3 days from the brothers committed in Sepang is that it's kind of heading that way. We've mentioned, I think, on one of the note shows, or maybe the Sepang preview that we did a few days ago, that Sepang is also obviously a very strong circuit for Alex Marquez. So to see him at the top of the time screens and looking so competitive, also on a technical package that is very much rooted in the successful bike of last year, the merits of it. Is no great shock. But then Marc Marquez, of course, riding a MotoGP bike for the first time since October last year, also looking pretty good. There was some CCTV footage of him sliding out in sort of typical style, but he said his off at turn 1 today was merely due to trying a different aero package, which altered the bike balance. He tried to brake for turn 1 in his usual fashion, but with that modified setting, it kind of threw him off a little bit. He said it was the best place to crash, in the middle of the corner, though, at slow speed. But still, Marquez pretty much saying, they still have to ratify a few things in Thailand in 2 weeks, but Otherwise, he's pretty much set for the season. So I think, we have to get used to the fact that Alex and Mark are going to be putting their joint name at the top of the championship for quite a few races this year.
Yeah, just get used to more of the same from what we saw for the first 3 quarters of last season as well. And David, what about you? Who was your big winner from the test?
I mean, my big winner is Alex Marquez, specifically. I mean, like, we know what Mark's going to be. The first day on the Tuesday, the first day we got to speak to Mark, I felt he's looking the same as last year, really, really trained, really, really thin, really, really literally, but really also quite gaunt. And he looked quite pale on that first day. And it feels like he's having to work harder and harder and harder to get to just to stay, just to keep going, because he knows that, one more injury and that's pretty much it for it. He's still clearly the fastest rider there. But to me, it was Alex Marquez who impressed me most. You look at his race pace and it was phenomenal. He did say, like, the first 2 laps, that was a bit, I got a bit enthusiastic for that. You're not supposed to be doing 57.2s. Those are the times you're supposed to be doing in qualifying. And so he cooked his tire a little bit. But even then, to keep the consistency, to be that fast, just genuinely impressive. And he looks really, really comfortable. And he appears to have done quite a good job on the GP26. And the other thing is, I think he's lucked out in the way that Marco Bezzecchi was unlucky in 2024 with getting on a GP23. Alex Marquez seems to have looked out by missing out on the GP25 and has gone straight to the GP26. There's a few differences to it. There's a different chassis, a different swing arm. They've tweaked the engine a little bit. They still haven't completely decided which aero package to use. The aero package they're using is looking very much like a GP25. I think he is going to have, he's going to have a very similar year. And going out now means he has, again, increased his market value, which is what he's needed. He did say today he will probably, he has some offers on the table. He can stay with Grassini. He'd love to stay with Grassini because of the family atmosphere. But if you get a chance to be a factory rider, then there's a big chance. And we could hear in the next 2 weeks where he's going to go.
Yeah, I think just to follow on the Alex theme, I think we probably did him a bit of a disservice in a show a couple of weeks ago when we were doing our predictions for this year. I think we failed to mention really Alex at any point in the show, which is a bit of a disservice to the rider that finished second in the championship last year, won 3 races, had his best ever season, and just to go into those sprint simulations that we saw in the afternoon on Thursday. I mean, Alex did an average lap time over 10 laps of 1:58.0, which is a tenth quicker than Pecco, 2/10 quicker than Mark. And then the next fastest rider that did a sprint simulation was Pedro Acosta, who did a 58.6 average. So that's, 0.6 of a second slower per lap. Alex was absolutely flying. And I think we're probably going to have to come to terms with the fact that last year was no one-off. This is kind of Alex's level now. And yeah, Dave is right when he says that he's lucked out and that Ducati have seemed to strengthen the GP26. But this seems to be Alex's level now. I mean, this is kind of him. He's a leading MotoGP frontrunner, and last year was no fluke. Not that we were sort of saying that, but I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah, I think it was always important for him to be able to back up what we saw last year, and maybe with GP26 he's able to do that. And then it becomes interesting to see where he goes after, with the talk of KTM potentially being one of those landing spots. And then are you able to maintain that momentum? Or do you fall back into what we had seen in the past from him as well? So that'd be quite interesting to see. But Neil, what about you? Who was your big winner from Sepang?
Well, just to continue on the Ducati theme, I'm going to plump for Pecco Bagnaia, because I think generally speaking, it was a very positive 3 days. I'm really careful not to jump all in on the big kind of conclusions, because this time a year ago we were lauding Yamaha for a sensational Sepang test, and their season didn't really quite pan out to be as successful as we maybe thought it was going to be this time 1 year ago. And even in this test 1 year ago, it did look like things were pretty good for Pecco. Nothing too dramatically bad or crazy was was being predicted at this point. It was more when we got to the Thailand test. But 3 solid days for him. Fast, really consistent in his sprint simulation. Everyone was sort of saying, whether it was the other Ducati riders or whether it was Massimo Rivola from Aprilia Racing, commenting on just how strong Pecco looked again, and everyone saying it's great to see Pecco back. Just seemed to be like that kind of quiet, confident Pecco that you see, or we saw during his strongest years. And I think the most telling comment from him was today, when he said that he pretty much knew from the first lap he did on Tuesday that this bike was immediately better than the one he had last year. He just had a lot more feel and confidence with the front end. And I think that was reflected in the performance. He was consistently there throughout all 3 days. The sort of, the really puzzling figure that just seemed to be completely unable to explain what was going on. That looks like it's a thing of the past. But again, we have to add in that this has always been a good track. Even last year, which was so bad for Pecco, he was still winning the sprint race and on course for second place in the feature race before he had that puncture. So you would have to maybe keep that in mind. But certainly early indications for this year, I think, are pretty good for Pecco.
Yeah, his demeanour was totally different to it was last year. He looked a lot happier, a lot more relaxed, a lot calmer. Obviously, the winter break was exactly what he needed. He needed to get away from, because you get into a vicious cycle of just failing and only seeing what's going wrong. And he needed that. He needed a good start to the test. That first day of the test was really decisive for him, but he just looked really good. He seemed like the old Pecco again. So, I mean, I don't want to say we're fully in so back territory, but we're definitely not in it's over territory.
Pecco was my winner from the test as well. And listening to his debriefs, just kind of reiterating what Dave and Neil said, but it was curious because he's grounded enough to say, listen, I know this track is good for me. And in the past, he also alluded a little bit to a change of mentality, because he said, in the past, I've aimed for fast lap times, whereas this time I got comfortable on the bike and then we started work. He didn't want to try so much stuff. But there were reassurances from the first laps that he did take that things were actually going to be on a better sort of, or a more even keel for him. The thing about Pecco as well, I do wonder, the rider market movement, of course, and props to all of the riders who managed to successfully evade questions throughout the 3 days, listening to all the debriefs. The amount of misdirection and deflection was pretty impressive overall, has to be said. And Dave,
I'm only focused on 2026.
Yes, how stupid! What a stupid comment. But I mean, Dave rather sweetly, waited until the last debrief of the test to sort of wander in there with Pecco and say, "Listen, what's happening with you in 2027?" Because it seems, Pedro Acosta, according to all the reading that we've seen and the people that we've heard in the paddock, is locked in as Marc Marquez's teammate. That leaves the double world champion somewhat in the cold. And he was quite honest. He said, after the season that I've had last year, it's normal that you find yourself sort of pushed out a little bit. And Dave, you then asked him if he felt that was justified, if it's a bit unfair. But he said, listen, that's the way it is. It's a results business. But I think that would be some big motivation for Bagnaia to prove some people wrong, some judgment wrong in these first few races. Of course, he had the mountain to climb, which was the psychological barrier against Marc Marquez in 2025. But now sort of he's a little bit of a man scorned, so watch him fly in 2026.
Yeah, and I think you could also see, some of Pecco's problems last year were reflected with Diggia and Antonio's form. Diggia and Antonio was saying last year it was really difficult to find a consistent feeling with the front. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't. It really differed from day to day. It differed from kind of tires that you use, different on, compared to or relating to track temperature. But Diggia also looked really, really comfortable and really pleased with everything. And Ducati with a couple of changes, that new ride height device as well. I'm not sure whether that was the factor, but certainly in top speed, Ducati were looking like they were bossing affairs. Just the top speed charts at the end of Thursday afternoon, I think the top 4 bikes were all Ducatis in terms of the fastest average 5 speeds from that session, which indicates that the kind of the engine work that they've done and the ride height device has probably helped in that regard. So I think really, really solid test for them.
When you hear other riders from other brands saying Ducati still seem to be on top and they're still the ones to catch, then there's almost like a sense of resignation.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's also important which manufacturers those riders are riding for that have that sense of resignation. If you're on an Aprilia that ended the season quite strongly and you're saying things like that, it's very different than if you're on the Yamaha or you're on one of the other bikes first. But Dave, what about you? Who was your next big winner from the test?
Well, that comes on quite nicely from your point, because my big winner from the test was Marco Bezzecchi. Bezzecchi looked, he was fast overall. He didn't really get to do a proper long run. He was happiest with the changes that they've made. He said basically they've made last year's bike a little bit better in every area. There was nothing really revolutionary. The whole thing is an improvement. What was interesting to me is that Raul Fernandez and Ayagura were not particularly happy with the new bike, with the RSGP 26, because they didn't really feel, they were still struggling with the bike. They didn't really feel it wasn't doing the things that they really needed it to do. So I think it's going to be interesting. And again, of course, Marco Bezzecchi was the first rider to sign a new contract. He is already signed up for 2 years after 2027. He was absolutely showered with praise by Massimo Rivola and everyone in the team. So and he got to put down pretty much every single day. He got to put down a couple of journalists. So it was all good for him.
Yeah, I think the amount of information we got out of Bezzecchi over the 3 days amounted to the kind of square size of a postage stamp. It was as if he had like this crazy determination to try and be as brief and wanton with journalists as humanly possible. So I have to praise him for that. But yeah, Bezzecchi was also one of my winners from the test as well. Kind of difficult to read in a way, because I mentioned those sprint simulations. I mean, Bezzecchi's average time over 10 laps was 58.9, which is 0.9 of a second per lap slower than Alex Marquez, which doesn't really sound that impressive. In fact, quite the contrary. But I was chatting to a colleague, Appleyard, who was out there doing work for After the Flag. He had spoken to Paolo Bonora, the team manager for the Aprilia factory team. And Bonora told him that when Bezzecchi started that sprint simulation, he was already on fairly used rubber. So I don't really think that was a true marker, a true indication of just where the Aprilia's potential lay. Obviously, he jumped up at the end of Thursday to set a really fast time. And I think considering he was as quick as he was, still setting a host of laps in the 58s on really used tires, I think that's a pretty good sign as well. And remember, this was a track where Aprilia really struggled at the end of 2025.
Yeah, some of those sprint simulations are quite difficult to read because people were on different tyres. Some were on absolutely new tyres. Some were on quite used tyres, or they were going out at different times of day. So it's not really. You can look at the times and they do mean something, but they're not directly comparable as you would really want.
Guys, I actually. Bear with me here, but I had Bezzecchi down as one of my losers from the test.
Quelle surprise!
Yeah, but you decided that before. You decided that before the test.
No, actually, I did decide this before the test when I saw that ridiculous contract extension ceremony.
Yeah, the extension wasn't the problem, Mad. It was the leathers were the problem for me.
Oh, yeah. Who's going to... Dainies, I'm sure, going to shift quite a few units of those fake wedding suit leathers.
I like them.
You're the same.
I'm sorry, I like them.
Okay, well, that's the clear sign that it's terrible, Dave. But I'd also say, I couldn't actually... When I saw the pictures originally, I was thinking... Has Rivola, is he the father of the bride? Is he giving the bike away? Is he
the cleaner?
Yeah, it was just, I thought it was brutal.
You're the same guys that would bitch and moan if a team just had a sort of rider smiling, looking into the camera, and just said such and such signs, with no sort of imagination.
No, the thumbs up is only for a picture with Dr. Mir. We've been through this before, Adam. It's not about contract extensions. That's the surgery went well, or the surgery occurred.
No, bear with me on this one. Like Neil said, this was a difficult track for Aprilia in 2025. Bezzecchi finished outside the top 10. I think it was probably one of his worst results from the second half of the season. So the fact that they're so quick, they have made progression is really encouraging. Everything else about Marco, I just shake my head. I mean, yes, we could have said, a strict press release and a photo and a comment about a 2-year extension, which I'm sure is pretty lucrative to Marco Bezzecchi's bank balance compared to his previous deal. But I remember looking at the images thinking this could have been done like a big sort of parody, very humorously in a video or something, with much more taste than it seemed to happen. I thought, is this really where we are in MotoGP in 2026? I'm sure that like a lot of 11 and 12-year-olds will probably think it's hysterical. But being sort of old, cynical, miserable some of the time, I just thought it was some of the time. I just thought it was very corny. And then, listening to Marco's debriefs, I thought, mate, if you're going to be the champion of MotoGP, then the series is in a worrying place. I mean, at least make an effort. You might be a brilliant rider, a fantastic racer, capable of results, but take a few sort of media training lessons to promote yourself, your brand, your sponsors, the championship. Try and do something, because evidently the series is giving you quite a lot. I think you have a responsibility to give some of it back. Do a better job, Marco.
In his defence, he did say in his debrief when we were trying to get some information out of him, he said, "I'm not allowed to say anything." So I think he's just there for entertainment purposes. But so it's not all Marco. I think it is also Aprilia.
I'd just like to praise you, Dave, because I think you actually said to him, "Thanks for nothing," after his debrief one day, because he was so vague.
Dave trying to be the voice of reason up until now, and then you bring that to it.
Yeah, you said it in a humorous way, though. It wasn't completely cutting, but I still appreciated it.
I like a bit of pettiness on it. What I would say, Ad, is, well, just in relation to that, like you mentioned Formula One earlier on, Formula One, the PR teams for F1 are massive, obviously, and you see that time and again. When you look at it in MotoGP, the PRs and the media people that we respect are the ones that realize what the job actually entails, rather than trying to be the rider's friend. I remember speaking to one former press officer in MotoGP, and he said, like, my job isn't to be the rider's best mate. My job is, for the year that I'm working with him, he just needs to do what he's told. And then when I see him in the paddock thereafter, I hope he doesn't look at me, because I don't want to be his friend. He doesn't want to be my friend. And this whole thing of us all trying to go on holidays together is bullshit. And I think that, like, when you look at it, for quite a lot of what we see in terms of like releases like this or other things that we see, they're all just geared towards just a social media post, rather than like what you were looking for with Aprilia, where, a bigger content, more than just... Yeah,
but it works on some weird, many sort of pseudo-sexual levels as well. Rider getting married to his motorcycle, kissing it a lot. I mean, if you're not getting laid copiously as a single MotoGP factory rider, then you're doing something wrong in life, I think.
He can't. He's married. He's married now. He's got to be monogamous. Although it was very much an open marriage, because he was allowed to ride other Aprilias.
Thanks for nothing, Dave. I do think it is interesting to see, though, the relationship between Marco and Aprilia, and how that has changed and evolved. Obviously, with Martin missing this test, we've been able to see it once again, just how big of a role Bezzecchi plays for Aprilia going forward, and the test showed that as well. So it will be interesting to see how those opening rounds play out, because Neil, you were mentioning about the difference in terms of the pace that we saw compared to the Ducatis. He needs to be able to step that up when we get to round one. But just to move it on then as well, Adam, when you look at for your last big winner, who are you picking from Sepang?
Diggia, very fast. Again, Neil mentioned a little bit about the inconsistencies of the GP25 last year, the fact that the Italian was able to make some good testing laps compared to last year when he crashed and had that injury. I think it's going to put him in a much better place, because he needed to get his head around the bike and the way it was behaving through the first half of last season. And I think maybe he's already a step ahead in that sense for 2026. So Diggia just is kind of shaping up to be one of those riders that might surprise people and sort of move up in terms of the bracket of results he's able to post.
Yeah, and I think after last year's test as well, we should probably include Raul Fernandez in this because he managed to get through the test as well, which is obviously the most important thing at this time of year. Neil, what about you? Who was your last big winner from Sepang?
Well, this will be a surprise to absolutely no one, but it was actually Maverick Vinales, because I thought he had a very solid couple of days. He was ninth on the combined standings, just narrowly behind Pedro Acosta. I think he was 100th of a second slower than Pedro with his fastest time. He was as high as third at the end of day one, which was a pretty remarkable return considering he had only made fleeting appearances from his injury comeback at the end of last year. There just seems to be kind of good vibes abounding in Camp Maverick. I mean, we can see this from pretty much everywhere we look nowadays because Jorge Lorenzo is broadcasting it from all sorts of different channels, whether it's his Instagram account or I think he was even popping up quite regularly on the MotoGP after the flag feed, speaking up his riders' chances. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it was a good test for KTM. Pedro Acosta gave it a 6 out of 10. He said one or two things didn't quite go right whenever he was doing his sprint simulation, which he didn't expect. But generally, there was, I think, a market improvement. KTM were in the shit this time a year ago, and certainly that doesn't seem to be anywhere near as apparent this time around. I think Maverick gave an indication that he can really push Acosta to be the top KTM this year. And listening to Lorenzo on after the flag, that does seem to be one of the goals that Maverick is entering 2026 with, to be that top KTM and to try and really give Acosta something to think about. So, I think
Maverick's already married, Neil.
But it's an excellent point. Maverick Vinales is looking really good. He's been the thing that he's been working on is his weakness. His weakness was always inconsistency. It was always poor conditions, and that is really where Jorge Lorenzo is helping. That I think is going to make a big difference. Also, he said that he was because he was really concerned about his shoulder. He said he was surprised that he felt no pain throughout the test. The shoulder was strong. He felt some strength. He did feel there was one or two points where he still needed to increase his strength of the back of the shoulder, for example. But yeah, he came out positively. And honestly, my last winner is KTM because they did have a really solid test. This time last year, they came out of the test and they had 4 different bikes going in 4 different directions and 4 different packages. And they didn't look. It took them half a year before they sort of looked like they knew what they were doing, and now everyone is narrowing down on the same package. Basically, the bike has made a step forward. It's still got a few problems. There's still a little bit of chatter. There's still some vibration and some sort of tire issues.
Well, Dave, Bastianini and Binder both said they wanted more turning as well from the different chassis they were trying.
Yeah, but that's been a problem for KTM. They've already improved the turning, but they need more. I mean, they made a step in turning sort of through last year. They were experimenting with quite a narrow sort of top fairing, almost sort of Aprilia-like, which is with a much smaller screen, and that sort of like it helps in 2 areas in that it's. There's less wind resistance, so it's easier to actually turn. But also, it exposes more of the rider, so the rider actually has a bigger effect. And once you start leaning out of the bike, then you start catching, actually catching some wind and creating some drag, and that actually helps the bike turn as well. So I'm quite like I don't expect KTM to be beating Ducati, but I think they made a big step closer to Ducati and Aprilia. So yeah, I think they have reason to be optimistic.
Yeah, and I think when you look at what Acosta was able to do in the second half of last season on a bike that was like quite a decent bit inferior to Ducati, I think if they're even able just to get a little bit closer, I think Pedro is probably still going to be able to override it and maybe compete with Ducati still, like he was doing in the final, 5-6 races of last year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's more that they're going to be closer. If they're starting the season this close, then by the end of the season, they're going to be much closer. Then it gets really, really interesting.
Acosta said on that small fairing that somehow it made the bike feel lighter, which is sort of related to what you were saying, Dave.
Yeah.
But they have sort of trialed that kind of bodywork before. So I do wonder if it's almost like a measurement system. It's not something that you'll likely see in say, especially in Thailand, where it's sort of big straights and sort of horsepower heavy.
I think the Bastianini went out on it as well. So they've been trying it actually with a few riders. So it really is to help the riders and to help the riders turn. So I do think we will see it. It was just weird seeing it with that silver tape over the side, which made it very easy to spot.
Obviously enough, whenever we've got so much to be positive about, it also means we've got quite a bit to be negative about as well in this pod, because when we have so many different winners, we've got different losers as well. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say we're all going to pick Yamaha as a big loser. So, Dave, what's your big reason for picking Yamaha?
I mean, the big reason for picking Yamaha is, to an extent, the overreaction of the... well, first of all, it's clear that Fabio Quartararo is leaving. He was one of the I only want to focus on 2026 at the moment crew. Then he managed to fall off and break his finger. Then one of his engines let go, one of Toprak's engines let go, and Yamaha Japan shut the whole thing down. They reviewed the information from the bikes and from what had happened, and realised that it wasn't as serious as they thought. It was a relatively easy fix, so they could ride again on Thursday. But they were just not competitive. They were not fast. They're in big trouble. They are exactly where I predicted they would be. When I was saying they shouldn't switch to a V4, it was for exactly this reason, because it takes a long time to develop it. They don't have the data, they don't have the experience, and they're just going to go through so many teething troubles. And I think they're going to face a really, really, really difficult season.
Yeah, and obviously with Quartararo having had that injury and missing out on the extra day of running compared to the other Yamaha riders puts them even more on the back foot. Adam, what about you? Anything to add for Yamaha?
No, just that the events of the tests pretty much cement, as Dave said, Fabio Quartararo's departure. He insisted to media as well that nothing is confirmed. That might be a fine example of the deflection I was talking about earlier. But if he hasn't, then you'd have to imagine that the accident and also the events of the test and the fact that Yamaha still have a lot of work to do, it seems, understandably so, pretty much put the seal on sort of their number one talent heading elsewhere.
Yeah, and just, the fact that they set out day 2 of the test, that's just unprecedented for an entire, manufacturer to sort of leave all of its fleet in pit lane because of one, persistent issue that they're having with their motors. It's just something that I can't recall that really in recent MotoGP history. It's a new project. Jack Miller was trying to remain grounded, trying to remain level-headed, saying this is what happens when you're 9 months into a project. These kind of teeth and issues persist. But, can you imagine if that had happened during a Grand Prix? Really would be a total disaster for the kind of image of Yamaha and Yamaha machinery. I think, there were the occasional positive, I think, for Yamaha. Jack Miller's sprint simulation was actually not too bad, pretty decent. It was kind of in a line with some other. It wasn't as if he was like miles slower. He was just a little bit off what Johann Zarco was able to do, for example, albeit about 1.4 seconds per lap slower than what Alex Marquez was doing. But I think it wasn't horrible, but you just have to look at the top speed charts. Every single day, the final 4, 5, 6, depending on the number of Yamahas that were on track, the final 5, 6 positions were always occupied by Yamahas, and they were about 10 kilometers down consistently on the fastest bikes out there. So still some serious work to do there.
That's Yamaha ticked off. But Dave, what about any of the other manufacturers? What about Honda? We haven't really talked about Honda yet, so they haven't been one of our big winners. Were they a bit of a loser this week, or where did they fare?
Honda is a loser. Have you gone mad? You've been spending a bit too much time in that tropical heat.
The tropical heat of Dublin. It's been very, very warm. Well, it's actually been very wet, so it has just been like the tropics. But we haven't mentioned Honda yet, and
No.
They made their big step last year.
They made their big step last year, and they haven't really made a step at the since then. The bike, it's a little bit better than last year, but they were hoping for more. Their sprint simulation was pretty poor. Sure, Joan Mir was what did I say, fifth overall. They could manage to do things. They still have this issue with rear grip. This is a problem that they've had now for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years, maybe going back to 2020, 21, 22. It's been around for such a long time, and it seems to be a fairly fundamental part of the bike. The Honda riders sort of sounded happy, but they didn't seem completely content. They felt like they still really needed to make a step, and I think I'm really looking forward to see what happens at Buriram, to see if they can make a step there.
Yeah, I think you're maybe being a little bit harsh on Honda, Dave. I thought Alberto Puig's comments on the After the Flag show today were, pretty upbeat. He was saying they were really pleased. He was saying the target is to win as soon as possible, which I thought, okay, that's quite a statement.
A team manager being positive about his own team's chances. That's amazing. I don't think...
Have you ever heard Alberto Puig being interviewed before, Dave? Not sure if you're aware of his oeuvre of classic interviews that he gives, but to hear him speaking so enthusiastically, I thought was quite telling. And it seems that they've made improvements in lots of areas. The new engine's better. The bike is lighter, it seems. They're still featuring around the top of the top speed charts. I think Luca Marini was saying today that the front end, which was really good last year, was also improved a little bit. Have to remember that Honda's been testing here like crazy at Sepang. Really good track for them at the end of last year. Joan Mir obviously getting that podium back in October. But I think generally speaking, it looked pretty good. And really, I think Joan Mir's enthusiasm was only sort of blunted somewhat by the speed of the Ducatis on the final day, when he was looking at some of the lap times that Alex Marquez was doing in his sprint simulation. He was like, that sounds like a qualifying run. And if I did that, the next lap I'd be doing would be like a 2-minute 1 or 2-minute 2, because I would have just burnt up my tires so much. So yeah, there's still distance between them and the top, but generally speaking, I think I get the impression anyway that the Honda camp is pretty happy.
I went and watched trackside with Peter Baum, and what we noticed it was just really, really physical. You could see them putting a lot more physical effort into turning the bike. Showan Zarco said, "Yeah, it is quite physical, but that's just the way it is."
I think it just. I have the impression they're treading water a little bit. There wasn't sort of these effusive comments, even the hyperbole that some riders tend to use to cover up things when it's not going so well. There wasn't even a feeling of that. Joan Mir was quick. Let's not ignore that fact. And I was struck today, actually, by looking at the Pro Honda press release, Diogo Moreira. The all blacked out sort of RCV, the amount of edges and aero and sort of pieces jutting out of the bodywork, it's quite phenomenal. It's quite a striking sight, the 2026 Honda. And you think, MotoGP is really coming right up. It's sort of lapping onto the shore of the last pieces of possibility, it seems, with this current technical platform. People are just trying more and more radical stuff to try and find edges of performance. And that sort of, comes onto my last sort of loser subject. And I do wonder if we're just in for another year of stasis of MotoGP with the same names, the same motorcycles, the same engineering, posting the same sort of results after the Sepang test. There's no hard evidence, it would seem, that things are going to shake up a little bit. So I think we just have to keep our patience in check. Of course, first laps of the season, so we can't get too carried away in any sense. But there is a sort of I don't know, a sense of inevitability, it seems.
Boy, you're Mr. Positive today, Ad. Goodness me.
I think
talk about something.
Yeah, me and Ad have had a soul swap because I'm Mr. Cheerio here, and there's grimps of Barcelona. And no, I mean, what was quite funny was that, you know, talking about there being perhaps not so much to look forward to. I was speaking to someone at Dawn, and they were saying, you know, about the silly season. They were sort of quite surprised that Bezzecchi had signed first, and they were basically saying, yeah, we'd sort of like hoped to use the silly season and the rider market as some of the entertainment through the season, and we were like, no, it's going to be over it's basically going to be over. The factory riders are pretty much all signed, and the rest are going to take maybe 3 or 4 races, and then that's that. You know, the whole thing is done. Apparently, there is someone in the paddock who works for an equipment supplier who knows exactly who is going to be going where in the future. But unfortunately, I couldn't find the right equipment to actually kidnap and torture them to get the secrets out of them.
What are you on about? Somebody knows something about someone, and we might not. You didn't find it out. That's peerless journalism, Dave.
Yeah, that is.
Could you be any more specific, Dave?
No, I couldn't, because if
I more vague.
Yeah, if I'm any more specific, then the people that I'm talking about will know that I'm talking about, and I'll get in trouble. So
they don't listen to this, Dave. Just walk away. It's fine. I have to say though, Adam, like in terms of MotoGP, did you not hear Dave at the start of the show saying that only 5 of the top 7 bikes were Ducati? It's going to be totally different this year. So loads of reasons to be optimistic for that. And obviously the next time that MotoGP bikes are out on track, Neil, we've got the Buriram test coming up next.
We do, Steve. Yes, absolutely. Which is the week before the first race. So what? How many weeks is that away? 2 weeks away, I think.
2 weeks away.
21 and 22 of February.
Yeah, and I'll be there actually. I'll be at the Buriram test, so I'll be able to.
Will you be able to offer us vague insights like Dave? For the people that he's been talking to but hasn't officially been talking to?
And that is the aim of any enterprising journalist, I believe, to offer that kind of insight. So yeah, be sure to be following us during the Buriram test for more such nuggets. Yeah,
I do think that the Buriram test is going to be much more instructive than Sepang. Sepang, Luca Marini said basically today, like Misano is the worst place to test because the grip itself has the track itself has fantastic grip, and then if you're testing on the Monday after a race weekend, there's so much rubber that you know the grip levels are just absolutely unbelievable, and you can't really tell anything. Sepang, the track itself doesn't have a huge amount of grip, but with so many bikes going around for 6 days, by the end of the test, it gets harder and harder to tell the difference between what's actually happening. Buriram is a bit of a weird track. It doesn't get used as much. You've got the special heat resistant tyre. You've got very long straights. You've got incredibly hot temperatures. It's much more demanding. It's much more difficult situations, and it's going to be. It's also from that point on, nobody can change sort of their engine. They can't really change their aero because there's not enough time between the race and they have to select from the packs that they have because they've only got sort of like 5 or 6 days before the race weekend starts. So yeah, I think the Buriram test is going to tell us a lot more.
And just while we're on the topic of our kind of losers from the test, I mean, we did mention Yamaha for very clear reasons. I think another person that would fall into the kind of category of coming away from this test not really entirely content with how it went would be Toprak Razgatlioglu, World Superbike champion. I mean, great to see him riding on track with the top MotoGP names. I think it quickly became apparent just why he's such a popular guy. Listening to his debriefs each day, he was
crowded.
Himself. Yeah, ingratiating himself to the media in no time at all. Witty, charismatic, just very sharp and funny.
He did say I look like Gordo, though.
That's a compliment.
Yeah,
this is true. Yeah, yes, I look like a legend of the World Superbike paddock. Yeah, it could be worse.
Exactly. But aside from his his kind of good. His good character and the kind of quips that he was throwing around in his debriefs, I think the performance itself was tricky. Obviously, losing a full day at this test was quite massive for him. I think he was actually saying that the front tire, which you would expect to be the most difficult thing to adapt to with the MotoGP bike, he feels that he's actually adapted to that quite well. He feels he's pretty strong in braking, and he's like matching some of the better guys in MotoGP on the brakes. But he said the rear tire is so difficult to understand. It's really, really sensitive. He said he's still struggling quite a lot in long corners. And just his entire ethos in World Superbike was just kind of wring the neck out of it. You just had to watch him on a World Superbike to understand that's how he rode. And you just have to be so much more refined in MotoGP. And that is not coming easily to him at this stage. He was expecting to be in the 157s, I think, by the end of the test. He was, 19th on the combined standings. Not terrible, 1.9 seconds off on a new bike as well. But yeah, 0.8 seconds off Alex Rins, the quickest Yamaha at the end of the test. And just at the end, he said he was kind of almost, his motivation was going down because it was like the more he was pushing, like the lap time just wasn't coming at all. So yeah, a tricky test, I would say, for Toprak. And I think it's just a really tough situation for a rookie to be in, coming in on a completely new bike, which is still having such pronounced and profound teething issues. That really cannot be an easy thing to kind of adjust to when you're used to winning as frequently as he has been in the last couple of years. So yeah, I'm hopeful. We all know that Toprak is one of the top talents in the world. But yeah, I think this was a tricky outing for him.
He did mention that. The Michelin is really tricky, and he sort of like he said he found it difficult to see his name at the bottom of the results. But he also said, "Get Pirellis next year."
Toprak's looking at that big change for him going from Superbikes to MotoGP. We've got a big change this year. We've got merchandise available on paddockpasspodcast.com/merch, and we've got t-shirts, we've got hoodies, we got hats, we got woolly hats, which are pretty important right now for me here in Ireland. And
not for me, not here.
Well, you're coming back to Europe pretty soon, Dave.
Yeah.
You can get your t-shirts for $35 on paddockpasspodcast.com/merch, and then everything else is available there for customers too. Now, at the moment, it's mostly available just for US customers in terms of just the postage and delivery. So check that out if you're one of our American podcast fans. Other than that, you can also go to patreon.com/paddockpasspodcast. And if you sign up for the Paddock VIP option, you actually get a couple of t-shirts, a hoodie, and a coffee mug included in that once you sign up as a VIP. We've got Paddock Experts as well, which allow you to get onto a group call with all of us and be able to basically ask your questions on MotoGP, World Superbikes, any type of racing, or just life in general. And you can check that out on patreon.com/Paddock Pass Podcast. Adam, we've been pretty busy with our Paddock Notes shows over the course of the Sepang test, and we've already had lots of additional content on Patreon so far this year, and a lot more to come.
Yeah, that's right, Steve. Plenty to listen to, and we're going to be filling the Patreon page up as we approach the first Grand Prix. So Neil, as he mentioned, is going to be in Buriram. We'll have a reflection, I think, on the MotoGP launch, the second ever of this sort of type of ceremony, which is taking place in Kuala Lumpur in a couple of days' time. My much better half is out there working for it. So I've had some interesting updates. Yeah. But yes, yeah. I mean, we're just accelerating towards the start of the season now.
Yeah, and I fly out to Australia this time next week, and we've got 2 days of testing, Monday, Tuesday in Phillip Island, and then into the race week as well. And myself and Gordo, and hopefully Evo as well from speedweek.com will be able to join us throughout the course of the season. But we've got a lot planned for that as well. So keep your eyes on your normal podcast channels for all of that, as well as Patreon for all of our additional content here on the Paddock Pass Podcast.